Yo, I'm Brendan. Today we're going to talk about some very nerdy changes to retirement accounts. If you're the kind of person that wants to maximize your retirement and be a finance nerd like I am and get into the nitty gritty of this, I don't know why I didn't see this until now, but there's like 5 different things that have changed that really open up some good options for us here. And it depends on how old you are, which of these changes you're going to pay attention to. For some of us, if you're already retired, then that really affects you and it can affect how you plan your money out. For others of us who are still in that saving and accumulation phase, it opens up new doors for us. So let's talk about these rules that are rolling out here at the end of 2024 and then go into effect for us. The first one is an amazing one that gives us a lot more options, and that's there are no more required minimum distributions from Roth 401k plans. So a Roth 401k is a fairly rare thing to have anyway. Like my wife's work has access to one, but I've never had access to one in my whole working career. It's never even been an option. The difference is the contributions you make to it, the money you send into this account is made after tax. And so it's already been taxed this year. It's been taxed once and forever, just like it is in a Roth IRA, but it's going into this 401k account for you. And up until now, you had to take required minimum distributions out of that account once you reached a certain age. I think it was typically like 72 years old. What that means for us functionally in everyday language is if you're 72 and you haven't needed that money for whatever reason, but you have money in the account, you would have to take out a required minimum amount per the government. And the reason for that, I think in a traditional account, was that they wanted to make you pay taxes on this money because you had gotten a tax break up until that point. So they're saying, look, you've got to take the money out sometime. We've got to get our tax revenue. So start taking it out. But because this is a Roth 401k, it's kind of illogical to have that rule in place. Like, why would you need to take out money that's already been taxed? It was just a silly thing. And so right now, what that change does is it brings it in line with the tax rules for a Roth IRA. This gives you more control over when and where you take money out of various accounts, depending on where you have it. And so now you could have a Roth IRA and a Roth 401k that are completely done with taxes, and you don't have to take the money out until you're ready. So that's a cool change. The next change, I think, isn't a terrible thing for us, but it does kind of restrict your options a little bit. And that's if you're over 50 years old and you're making a catch-up contribution to your 401k. That means if you're sending in more than those of us who are under 50 are allowed to put in there, I think you get an extra $7,000 per year that you're allowed to contribute. And if you're also a high earner, that money has to go into a Roth account. So this is starting in 2026, and this is specific to 401ks. So this is not about a Roth IRA whatsoever. Don't confuse those terms just because they're both Roth in terms of taxes. An IRA is yours and is hosted by you and the company that you choose to invest with. A 401k is an employer-sponsored plan, and so it's through your work. Just make sure that's really clear. This isn't going to affect hardly anybody, I don't think, because those of you who have a high enough income to think about doing this, to think about contributing $30,000 a year to your 401k and can afford it because your income is so high, the government's basically saying you're not allowed to get as much of a tax break on that money because your catch-up contribution, part of that has got to go into a Roth account. Okay. Whatever, guys. It's not a huge deal. It's not going to make or break you tax-wise. Just a little bit limiting that now you don't have that choice of either one. It's got to be in the Roth. This next one is pretty cool because it allows for more tax-deferred growth. And what the change is saying that if an older spouse is a beneficiary of an IRA owned by a younger spouse. So for example, like if I'm the beneficiary of my wife's IRA, she's younger than me. If the younger spouse dies, then your rule as far as when you have to take required minimum distributions is based on the age of the younger spouse. And so what that does for us functionally is give you more time for that account to grow before you get hit with those RMDs, the required minimum distributions. So just because you're older, having you get hit by that RMD because you're nearer that age than your spouse doesn't really make sense. They're letting it be tied to the deceased spouse. I know it's not like the sexiest topic to talk about people dying and inheriting accounts and whatever, but it means you're going to be able to retain more of your money and decide what to do with it yourself. So that's a good change. These next 3 or 4 changes are actually a lot more exciting. So let's get into those now. Starting in 2023, actually, so last year, the penalty for missed RMDs was reduced to 25% of the missed amount, and before it was 50%. So what that means is if you forgot to take out this required amount because the IRS says, hey, you're 73 years old and you got to be taking out this money, and for whatever reason you didn't know about that, you didn't do it, they would penalize you hugely, knock you with 50%. Now that's down to a 25% penalty, but it can be even less than that. It can go down to a 10% penalty if you correct it in a timely manner, which is only within 2 years of the year from which the RMD should have been taken. So you've got 2 years to right this wrong and only get hit with a 10% penalty. I think it's a fantastic change. I think that severity level was way too high before, that for most of us, it's not going to be a huge amount of money we're trying to like save and put off to the side. So I think this is a really worthwhile change, and it's good to know that you have 2 years to fix it and drastically reduce that even more, just to 10%. And speaking of forgetting about your RMDs, there's a new statute of limitations for missed RMDs. So before these new changes were rolled out in that Secure 2.0 Act, if you miss your RMDs from an IRA, the amount of penalties and interest that you could accrue, and I have to like payback to the IRS could go on indefinitely. Now there's only a 3-year statute of limitations beginning with filing of the income tax return for the relevant year. And so what that means is that the IRS can't penalize you for earlier RMDs that are beyond that 3-year limit. It minimizes that window of time that you can get penalized for this. Because again, is this really the best use of the IRS's, funding and attention to go out and penalize retirees who are forgetting to file a little tax thing here and there, or take out $500 for an RMD or whatever the rule is? Like, it's kind of silly that this was so strict before. So they've really limited the amount of time that you can get hit with those penalties and interest. And this next one I might have to use. So there's a new statute of limitations for excess contributions. So now there's a 6-year statute of limitations time period for excess contributions to an IRA. The rule is that your contributions, what you put in the account, have to be at least equal to your taxable compensation, and then the maximum annual contribution for anybody under 50 is $7,000. If you're over 50, it's $8,000. And so let's say, hypothetically, last year, my actual taxable income per the IRS was $4,000, and somehow I contributed $5,000 to my IRA. Well, that could be a problem. Now that time period where I could have my wrist slapped and have to fix this is only 6 years. So it's limiting, again, the amount of time that I can be having a target on my back for the IRS. The next one applies to those of us who are still contributing to our accounts. We're not retired yet, and that's that Roth contributions to SEP and simple IRA plans have changed. So before 2023, all the contributions that you put in these kinds of IRAs had to be on a pre-tax basis. And so that meant that they were like a traditional IRA or traditional 401k. Now you actually can do Roth contributions, and that means they're after tax. You get all the same Roth benefits. So this is a really cool thing if you're a solo business owner like I am, or if you've got a small company and you set up this kind of plan to benefit your employees. It's a really cool thing that you can also have this Roth option now. And speaking of Roth options for employees, the last thing that's changed is that employer matches can now be a Roth. So before now, an employer matching what you contributed into your 401k had to be pre-tax, had to be like a traditional IRA, traditional 401k. Since last year, 2023, if an employer does let you do that, the employee, so you, the worker, can choose to have it be made Roth. One thing to know about that, though, is that, of course, you're going to have to pay taxes on it this year, just like any other Roth contribution. If it's a Roth contribution, you're paying tax on it this year, just like you would income. It's like your boss giving you a raise. You got to pay tax on the difference between before and after the raise. But then the cool thing is, if you're younger, if you've got a lot of time for it to grow, if you're in a lower tax bracket, that means you're getting taxed this one little amount this year, and for the rest of all time, it grows tax-free, and you can withdraw the money tax-free whenever you're retired. And like we mentioned in one of the first things that have changed, then your RMDs for the Roth 401k aren't required anymore. And so this really gives you a lot of options in terms of funneling as much money as possible into a Roth account if that's what you want. That's it for the changes. I know that they're very, very nerdy and very detailed, but if you're a finance nerd like I am and you want to know these changes, you want to understand this kind of thing, I wanted to give it to you. Watch this video next to see more about investing in the stock market, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.